A starborn princess, a human guard, and a love that defied destiny. The crystal spires of Lumina Prime pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces catching the light of 3 distant suns. Princess Zarathiel stood at the edge of her tower's balcony, her luminescent skin shimmering with patterns that matched her troubled thoughts. The Asterian royal bloodline carried the essence of stars themselves, making her people appear as living constellations against the darkness of space. But today, those beautiful patterns flickered with anxiety. Below in the courtyard, a transport vessel descended through the atmospheric shields. Zarathiel knew what it carried, another batch of candidates for her personal guard. The 3rd group this month. Her previous guardians had all failed the same test, though none knew they were being tested. They had looked upon her beauty and immediately declared their love, their devotion, their willingness to die for her radiance. It was always the same hollow worship that made her feel more like a precious object than a person. Her father, Emperor Kethamorian, had grown tired of replacing guards. The threats against the royal family had increased since the Void Syndicate began their expansion into Asterian space. Pirates, assassins, and worse prowled the star lanes, seeking to capture or eliminate those who carried the celestial bloodline. Zarathiel needed protection, but she also needed someone who could see past the luminous beauty that had become her curse. The transport doors hissed open, revealing 5 figures in various types of armor and clothing. 4 were clearly from the major galactic species: a towering Corvin with stone-like hide, a graceful Etherian whose form seemed to shift between solid and mist, a cybernetically enhanced Nexari with glowing implants, and a sleek Voidkin whose dark skin seemed to absorb light itself. These were predictable choices, representatives of powerful species allied with the Asterian Empire. But the 5th figure made Zarathiel lean forward with curiosity. A human. She had heard of this species, relatively new to the galactic community, originating from a small blue world on the outer rim. They were considered primitive by most standards, lacking the natural abilities that defined the major species. No energy manipulation, no environmental adaptation, no enhanced physical capabilities, just baseline biology and whatever technology they could build or borrow. This human stood shorter than the others, wearing simple combat armor that looked functional rather than impressive. His dark hair was cut short, and his face bore the kind of weathered look that spoke of real experience rather than pampered training. While the other candidates postured and preened, showing off their natural abilities, the human simply observed his surroundings with alert brown eyes. Captain Veltar, the chief of palace security, began the introductions. Each candidate stepped forward to demonstrate their qualifications. The Corvin punched through a steel barrier with his rock-hard fists. The Etherian phased through solid matter, showing how he could protect the princess by making them both intangible. The Nexari's implants interfaced with the palace security systems, displaying his ability to control technology. The Voidkin manipulated shadows, creating areas of absolute darkness that could conceal his charge. When the human's turn came, he simply stated his name, Marcus Chen, and his experience as a soldier in something called the Terran Defense Corps. He made no flashy display, claimed no special powers, and showed no reverence for Zarathiel's luminous presence. In fact, he barely glanced at her. "And your special qualifications?" Captain Veltar asked, clearly unimpressed. "I'm still alive," Marcus replied simply. "Been in more fights than I can count. Lost some, won more. The ones I lost taught me why I won the others." The captain's mandibles clicked with annoyance. "The princess requires protection from sophisticated threats. Assassins with molecular weaponry, shapeshifters, psychic manipulators. What can a baseline human offer against such dangers?" Marcus looked directly at Zarathiel for the first time, and she felt something unexpected. He wasn't staring at her beauty or her patterns of light. He was studying her face, reading her expression, seeing her as a person rather than a glowing artwork. "Respectfully, sir," Marcus said, his gaze returning to the captain, "I think you're asking the wrong question. It's not what I can offer against those threats. It's what I won't offer that might make the difference." "Explain," the captain demanded. "Every one of these candidates just showed you their greatest strength. They also showed any watching enemy exactly what to prepare for. The Corvin's strength means nothing against a neural disruptor. The Etherian can't phase if he's unconscious. The Nexari's implants can be hacked or overloaded. The Voidkin needs darkness to hide in. Marcus gestured around the bright courtyard. I don't have special abilities to counter or weaknesses to exploit. I adapt, improvise, and survive with whatever's available. Sometimes the best protection is being underestimated. Zarathiel found herself intrigued by this reasoning. It was the first time anyone had spoken about her protection in terms of tactics rather than devotion. But her father materialized beside her in a shimmer of starlight, his presence instantly commanding attention. An interesting philosophy, Emperor Kethamorian said, his voice carrying the authority of eons. But philosophy doesn't stop assassins' blades. No, sir, Marcus agreed. Training, preparation, and quick thinking do, along with a healthy paranoia and the willingness to put the principal's safety above everything else, including my own life and their comfort. The Emperor's patterns shifted to show thoughtfulness. Their comfort? Sometimes staying alive means doing things that aren't pleasant or dignified. If I have to carry the princess through a sewer to keep her safe, I'll do it. If I have to tell her to stay quiet when she wants to speak, I'll do that too. My job isn't to make her happy. It's to make sure she lives long enough to be unhappy about my methods. A ripple of shock went through the other candidates. Speaking so bluntly about royal discomfort bordered on lèse-majesté, but Zarathiel felt a spark of something she hadn't experienced in years, respect for someone who saw her as a person with agency rather than a precious object to worship. The Emperor's pattern shifted again, and Zarathiel recognized the subtle signs of approval. Her father had always valued practical wisdom over flowery devotion. We will consider all candidates, he announced. The selection will be made within the day. As the group was escorted to quarters to await the decision, Zarathiel caught Marcus looking up at her balcony one more time. Their eyes met across the distance, and she saw something in his expression that made her stellar patterns flutter with anticipation. For the first time in her life, someone had looked at her and seen not a goddess to worship, but a person worth protecting. A starborn princess, a human guard, and a love that defied destiny. The selection ceremony took place in the Hall of Eternal Stars, where holographic representations of every star in Asterian space created a glittering dome overhead. Zarathiel sat beside her father's throne, trying to maintain the serene expression expected of royalty, while her thoughts churned like a stellar storm. The other candidates had spent the evening sending gifts, poems, and declarations of undying devotion to her quarters. Marcus Chen had sent nothing. Emperor Kethamorian rose from his crystalline throne, his stellar patterns casting rainbow shadows across the assembled court. The safety of the royal bloodline transcends all other considerations, he announced. We have reviewed the qualifications of each candidate and made our decision based on merit rather than tradition. The 4 non-human candidates straightened with confidence. Their species had provided royal guards for centuries. The Corvan flexed his stone-hard muscles. The Etherean's form shimmered with anticipation. The Nexari's implants glowed brighter, and the Voidkin's shadow seemed to deepen with satisfaction. The position of Princess Zarathiel's personal guardian goes to Marcus Chen of Terra. The silence that followed could have stopped a star from burning. Court officials, nobles, and the rejected candidates stared in disbelief. A primitive human chosen over beings with natural powers and enhanced abilities? Zarathiel felt her own patterns flicker with surprise, though something deeper, perhaps relief, ran through her luminous form. Marcus stepped forward and offered a simple bow, nothing like the elaborate genuflections usually performed before royalty. Your Majesty, I won't let you down. See that you don't, the Emperor replied. Princess, your guard will begin his duties immediately. As the ceremony disbanded amid whispered conversations and barely concealed outrage, Zarathiel found herself walking beside Marcus through the palace corridors. He maintained a professional distance, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings rather than staring at her radiant beauty. You seem surprised by my father's choice, she observed. Not really, Marcus replied, pausing to check a side corridor before they continued. He's smart. The other candidates were impressive, but they were also predictable. Sometimes survival comes down to being the variable no one planned for. They reached her private chambers, where Marcus immediately began a thorough inspection. He checked windows, examined artwork for hidden compartments, and tested the locks on every door. His methodical approach was unlike anything Zarathiel had experienced from previous guards, who usually spent their time composing poetry about her luminescence. Do you find this boring? she asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Ma'am. Marcus looked up from examining a decorative vase. This duty, guarding someone who glows like a star. Most beings are either terrified by my power or entranced by my beauty. You seem unaffected. Marcus set down the vase and met her gaze directly. With respect, Princess, I've seen a lot of beautiful things in the galaxy. I've also seen beautiful things kill good people. Beauty isn't what keeps someone alive when the shooting starts, then what does? Trust, training, and someone who's more concerned with your survival than their own reputation. That evening brought Zarathiel's first real taste of Marcus's protection style. She had planned to attend a cultural performance in the Palace Theater, but Marcus insisted on arriving an hour early to inspect the venue. He questioned the performers, examined their instruments, and even tested the acoustic systems for hidden recording devices. This is excessive, Zarathiel protested as Marcus insisted on having the royal food taster check every item brought into her viewing box, even the decorative flowers. Maybe, Marcus agreed, but excessive is alive. The Void Syndicate has infiltrated 3 royal courts in the past year using poisoned gifts. I'd rather have you annoyed with me than have your father planning your funeral. The performance was a traditional Asterian light dance, where performers used their natural luminescence to create flowing patterns of color and motion. Zarathiel had seen it countless times, but tonight she found herself watching Marcus instead. While the audience gasped at particularly beautiful sequences, he remained alert, his attention divided between the stage and potential threat. Vectors, you're not enjoying the show, she whispered. I'm enjoying the fact that you're safe enough to watch it, he replied quietly. Something in his tone made her stellar patterns shift to softer hues. When had someone last cared more about her well-being than their own entertainment? When had anyone seen her safety as more important than her satisfaction? The attack came during the final act, when the performers created a brilliant crescendo of light that temporarily overwhelmed the theater's sensors. Smoke grenades detonated in multiple locations, filling the air with a thick gray cloud that blocked both normal vision and energy-based sight. Panic erupted as the audience realized they couldn't see the exits. Down. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos as he tackled Zarathiel behind the reinforced barrier of her viewing box. Stay low and don't use your light. But people need guidance, and assassins need targets. Your light makes you a beacon for anyone with hostile intent. Through the smoke came the distinctive whine of energy weapons. Security forces were engaging multiple attackers, but the theater's acoustics made it impossible to determine locations or numbers. Marcus pressed a small device into Zarathiel's hand. Emergency beacon. If I don't make it, activate this and follow the green light to the extraction point. Where are you going? Panic touched her voice. To do my job. Marcus disappeared into the smoke with a fluid grace that surprised her. For someone without enhanced abilities, he moved like a predator through the chaos. She heard brief, violent struggles in the darkness, the sound of bodies hitting walls, weapons clattering to the floor, and Marcus's voice directing security forces to specific locations. 3 shooters, East Gallery. 2 more flanking from the service tunnels. Princess is secure, maintain perimeter. His tactical awareness was extraordinary for someone relying purely on human senses. While enhanced beings struggled with the smoke's interference with their special abilities, Marcus adapted and overcame. He fought like someone who had never expected to have advantages, someone who had learned to win through pure skill and determination. When the emergency lighting finally cleared the smoke, Zarathiel saw Marcus standing over 4 unconscious attackers. His armor scored by energy blasts, but his stance steady. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, but his weapon remained ready as security forces secured the area. Princess, he called without turning around. Sound off. I'm safe, she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. Only then did he relax his stance and approach her position. Are you hurt? No, but you are. She reached toward the cut on his forehead, her touch instinctively carrying healing starlight. Marcus gently caught her wrist before her fingers made contact. Better not. Might leave evidence of your involvement for forensics to find. The consideration stunned her. Even while injured, he was thinking about protecting her from political repercussions. No one had ever put her safety above the honor of receiving her healing touch. As palace medics treated his injuries and security debriefed the incident, Zarathiel watched Marcus coordinate with the investigation team. He provided precise tactical analysis, suggested security improvements, and showed no interest in claiming credit for preventing her capture or death. Later, as they walked back to her quarters under heavy escort, she spoke quietly. "You saved my life tonight." "I did my job tonight," Marcus corrected. The other candidates would have made speeches about their heroic actions. "The other candidates might have gotten you killed trying to look heroic, Zara." Thiel's pattern shifted to warm gold, a color that, in Asterian culture, indicated deep respect and emerging trust. For the first time in her life, she felt truly protected rather than merely guarded. "Marcus." "Yes, Princess." "Thank you for seeing me as someone worth protecting rather than something worth possessing." Marcus paused at her chamber doors, meeting her luminous gaze with steady brown eyes. "Everyone deserves to be safe, Your Highness, even people who glow." As he took his position outside her quarters for the night watch, Zarathiel realized that something fundamental had changed. This human had defended her not because of her beauty or status, but because protecting others was simply who he was. For the first time in her life, she felt seen as a person rather than a prize. And that realization terrified her almost as much as the assassins had. A star-born princess, a human guard, and a love that defied destiny 3 weeks after the theater attack, Zarathiel found herself looking forward to her morning security briefings in a way that puzzled her. Marcus had established a routine of reviewing daily schedules, threat assessments, and security protocols, while she took breakfast on her private terrace. Unlike previous guards who had treated these meetings as opportunities for flattery, Marcus approached them as professional discussions between equals. "The Nexari delegation arrives this afternoon for the trade negotiations," he reported, scanning his datapad with practiced efficiency. "Intelligence suggests the Void Syndicate has been targeting their shipping lanes. Could be coincidence, could be they're trying to disrupt the alliance talks." "Do you suspect the delegation itself?" Zarathiel asked, impressed by how naturally she'd fallen into thinking tactically rather than diplomatically. "Maybe. Or maybe someone wants us to suspect them. Either way, I've coordinated with Captain Veltar to add extra screening protocols." She watched him work, noting how his focus remained entirely professional, even when her stellar patterns unconsciously shifted to match her emotional state. Right now, those patterns showed the warm amber of contentment, something that hadn't graced her luminescence in years. "You're different from the others," she observed. Marcus looked up from his datapad. "Ma'am?" "The other guards. They saw protecting me as a privilege to boast about. You treat it as a responsibility to fulfill, because that's what it is." His brown eyes met her luminous gaze without flinching or worship. "Anyone can die for someone else in a moment of glory. It takes more discipline to live for them every day." The simple truth of that statement settled between them like starlight on water. Zarathiel felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with her stellar nature and everything to do with being understood. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Captain Veltar. The Nexari delegation had requested an immediate private audience with Princess Zarathiel, claiming urgent intelligence about Void Syndicate activities. The meeting was scheduled for the neutral ground of the palace gardens. "I don't like it," Marcus said as they prepared to leave her chambers. "Too many variables, too much cover, and the timing feels forced. But if they have genuine intelligence about the Syndicate, then they can share it in a secure conference room with proper witnesses and recording equipment." Marcus checked his sidearm and tactical gear with methodical precision. "This feels like a setup." Despite his concerns, diplomatic protocol required the meeting to proceed. Marcus insisted on additional security sweeps and positioned backup teams throughout the gardens. But Zarathiel could see the tension in his shoulders as they walked the crystalline pathways toward the designated meeting point. The Nexari delegation consisted of 3 individuals, their cybernetic implants gleaming against their scaled skin. Ambassador Kextalan led them, his neural interfaces casting subtle light patterns that seemed designed to complement Zarathiel's natural luminescence. "Your Radiance," the ambassador began with an elaborate bow. "We bring disturbing news about threats to your safety." Marcus positioned himself where he could watch both the delegation and the surrounding garden, his hand resting casually near his weapon. Something about the Nexari's formation bothered him. They stood too precisely, like soldiers rather than diplomats. "Please speak freely," Zarathiel replied, though she noticed Marcus's tension. and found herself unconsciously moving closer to his protective presence. Our intelligence networks have identified a new void, syndicate cell operating within the palace itself, Ambassador Kextelen announced. Someone with access to your personal schedule and security protocols. That's a serious accusation, Zarathiel said carefully. Do you have evidence? More than evidence, Your Radiance. We have the traitor. The ambassador's implants flared brighter and his companions moved with synchronized precision that confirmed Marcus's suspicions. But instead of targeting Zarathiel, they pointed weapons at Marcus. Your human guard is a Void Syndicate operative, Kextalen declared. Our intelligence shows he was recruited before arriving on Lumina Prime. The theater attack was staged to establish his credibility. Shock rippled through Zarathiel's patterns, but not the shock the conspirators expected. Instead of betrayed fear, she felt a surge of protective anger at seeing weapons aimed at Marcus. Her stellar light flared with brilliant intensity. Lower your weapons immediately, she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of stellar fire. Your Radiance. You're being manipulated by a trained infiltrator, the ambassador insisted. He's been conditioning you to trust him so he can deliver you to his syndicate masters. Marcus hadn't drawn his weapon or made any aggressive moves. Instead, he'd shifted position to shield Zarathiel while calculating angles and distances with predatory focus. Princess, he said quietly, when I give the signal, drop and cover your eyes. Your light at full intensity will blind everyone except you. You see? Kextalen exclaimed. He's already planning to use your own abilities against you. But Zarathiel understood now. Marcus wasn't planning to harm her. He was turning her greatest vulnerability into their greatest advantage. Her luminous nature that made her a target could also be a weapon if used correctly. Ambassador, she said with deadly calm, you've made a critical error in judgment. Your Radiance, you assumed I was weak. You assumed I was naive. And you assumed my guard was my weakness rather than my strength. Her patterns began shifting to brilliant white, the precursor to a stellar flare that could temporarily blind unprotected eyes. The Nexari immediately raised their weapons toward her. Now, Marcus shouted. Zarathiel released her stellar nature in a blaze of light that turned the garden into a miniature star. The false Nexari cried out in agony as their cybernetic implants overloaded from the energy surge. Marcus moved like lightning, disarming the three conspirators while they struggled with burned-out neural interfaces. When the light faded, real palace security was already surrounding the scene. The imposters, revealed now as Void Syndicate operatives using stolen Nexari technology, lay unconscious under Marcus's efficient restraint techniques. How did you know? Zarathiel asked as medical teams treated the operatives' injuries. Their formation was military, not diplomatic, Marcus explained, securing the captured weapons. And they knew too much about palace security for legitimate visitors. But mainly, they tried to convince you I was a threat by pointing weapons at me. Real allies don't start conversations with guns. Captain Veltar arrived with additional security and began processing the scene. As statements were taken and evidence secured, Zarathiel found herself studying Marcus with new understanding. You could have drawn your weapon immediately, she observed. Instead, you trusted me to be your partner, rather than just someone to protect. You are a partner, Marcus replied. Protection works both ways when both people are capable of fighting back. The simple acknowledgement of her competence and agency struck her more powerfully than any romantic declaration. Marcus had seen her not as a delicate flower to shelter, but as a formidable ally to fight alongside. That evening, as they reviewed the incident reports in her study, Zarathiel felt compelled to address what was becoming impossible to ignore. Marcus, may I speak candidly? Always, Princess. I think I'm beginning to care for you in ways that go beyond the professional relationship between a royal and her guard. Marcus set down his datapad and looked at her directly. I know, and I think you should be careful about that. Because of the difference in our stations? Because of the difference in our lifespans. His expression showed genuine concern rather than rejection. Asterians live for millennia. Humans are lucky to see a century. Starting something that's designed to end in heartbreak doesn't seem fair to either of us. Zarathiel's patterns shifted to soft silver, the color of moonlight and deep emotion. Perhaps fairness isn't the right measure. Perhaps what matters is whether something is genuine. And if it is genuine, Marcus asked quietly, then maybe the length of time matters less than the depth of connection. They sat in comfortable silence as twin moons rose beyond her windows, each lost in thoughts about destiny, duty, and the unexpected ways that hearts could find each other across the vastness of space. Neither of them noticed the small surveillance device that had activated in the decorative vase Marcus had examined weeks earlier, a device that had been recording everything, waiting for exactly this kind of conversation to transmit to very interested parties who viewed royal emotions as exploitable weaknesses. The Void Syndicate's next move would target not Zarathiel's body, but her heart. A starborn princess, a human guard, and a love that defied destiny. The message arrived during the pre-dawn hours when the palace hummed with minimal activity. Marcus intercepted it during his routine communication sweeps, a practice that had become second nature since the fake Nexari incident. The transmission bore Void Syndicate encryption codes, but what made his blood run cold was its destination, Princess Zarathiel's personal communication array. Inside the encrypted message was a recording of their conversation from the previous evening, along with detailed surveillance footage showing intimate moments between them, meals shared in comfortable silence, casual touches when she healed minor injuries, the way her stellar patterns unconsciously synchronized with his emotional state during their talks. The blackmail demand was elegantly simple. Zarathiel would accompany a rescue mission to retrieve captured Asterian civilians from a Syndicate prison ship. She would come alone, using her royal authority to prevent interference. In exchange, the surveillance recordings would be destroyed rather than broadcast across the galaxy as evidence of an Asterian princess consorting inappropriately with a primitive human guard. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, calculating probabilities and outcomes. The Syndicate had done their research well. They knew that scandal could destroy Zarathiel's political standing and ruin any chance of her eventual succession to the throne. They also knew that she would never allow innocent civilians to suffer for her personal choices. What they didn't know was how much they had underestimated both the princess and her guard. "Princess," Marcus said when she emerged from her chambers for their morning briefing. "We have a problem." He showed her the message and recordings, watching her stellar patterns shift from confusion to anger to cold determination. She studied the surveillance footage with the analytical mind that most beings missed beneath her luminous beauty. "They've been watching us for weeks," she observed. "The device was already in place when you first examined my chambers, which means this was planned before the theater attack, maybe even before I was selected as your guard." Marcus felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. They wanted someone you'd trust, someone you'd become emotionally invested in. "I was supposed to be their asset, but you weren't recruited." Her patterns shifted to warm gold as she looked at him. "Which means they're improvising now." "Badly," Marcus agreed. "This kind of emotional blackmail only works if the targets are ashamed of their connection." "Are you?" Zarathiel's answer came without hesitation. "No, are you?" "No." Marcus felt something settle in his chest as he said it. "Which gives us options they didn't plan for." They spent the next hour developing a strategy that turned the Syndicate's trap into their own offensive operation. The key was giving their enemies what they expected while preparing for what they actually intended. That afternoon, Zarathiel announced her intention to personally lead a humanitarian mission to rescue captured civilians. Despite vigorous protests from palace security and her father's advisors, she used her royal prerogative to authorize the operation. Marcus would accompany her along with a small team of volunteers. "This is insane," Captain Veltar declared during the mission briefing. "The Void Syndicate vessel could be carrying anything from pirates to biological weapons." "Which is why we're taking appropriate precautions," Zarathiel replied calmly. "Marcus has identified several tactical advantages we can exploit." What she didn't mention was that those advantages included turning her own stellar nature into a weapon system that no Syndicate forces would be prepared to counter. The plan was risky, requiring precise timing and absolute trust between them. But it offered something rare in military operations: complete surprise. The Syndicate vessel hung in the darkness between star systems, its hull configured to look like a disabled civilian transport. Sensor readings confirmed life signs aboard that matched Asterian civilian patterns, lending credibility to the supposed rescue mission. "Still time to call for backup," Marcus murmured as their small ship approached the target. And risk innocent lives if this is a legitimate situation? Zarathiel checked her equipment one final time. Besides, backup assumes we can't handle this ourselves. Their infiltration began according to the Syndicate's expectations. Zarathiel hailed the vessel with royal authority, demanding permission to board and assist with medical emergencies. The response came from Commander Vexachar, a known Syndicate operative whose reputation for cruelty preceded him across multiple star systems. "Your Radiance," the commander replied with mock courtesy.
"How generous of you to respond to our distress call."
"Please dock at Bay 7. We have many injured who would benefit from your healing light." The trap was obvious to anyone with tactical training, but Zarathiel played her part perfectly. She entered the vessel with Marcus at her side, projecting the image of naive royalty rushing to help those in need. The Syndicate had prepared well. Energy-dampening fields filled the corridor to suppress her stellar abilities. Armed operatives waited in concealment. Even the supposed civilians were revealed to be holographic projections designed to lure her deeper into the ship. "Welcome aboard, Princess." Commander Vexachar emerged from the shadows with 24 armed soldiers. "I trust your journey was comfortable?" "Where are the civilians?" Zarathiel demanded, her patterns flickering with controlled anger. "There never were any civilians."
"Only bait for a trap that has been months in the making." The commander gestured to wall monitors displaying the surveillance recordings.
"Did you really think your romantic entanglement with this primitive would remain secret forever?" Marcus had remained silent during the exchange, but Zarathiel could sense his readiness. Their plan depended on the Syndicate's overconfidence and their fundamental misunderstanding of both Asterian abilities and human adaptability. "The recording will be broadcast across the galaxy within the hour unless you cooperate," Vexachar continued. "Your reputation, your political future, your family's honor, all will be destroyed by your poor choice in companions." "You're right about one thing," Zarathiel said quietly. "I did make a choice in companions, and it was the best decision of my life." The signal she gave was subtle, a shift in her stellar patterns that Marcus had learned to recognize. In that instant, several things happened simultaneously. Marcus triggered a device that overloaded the ship's energy-dampening systems, causing feedback that disabled most of the Syndicate's weapons. Zarathiel released her stellar nature not as a blinding flare, but as a precisely controlled electromagnetic pulse that fried electronic equipment while leaving organic beings unharmed. But the most devastating part of their counterattack was psychological. As the Syndicate operatives struggled with disabled weapons and failed technology, Marcus moved through them with fluid efficiency that spoke of years fighting opponents with superior equipment. He didn't rely on special abilities or advanced weapons, just skill, training, and the kind of adaptability that had kept humanity alive in a hostile galaxy. Within minutes, the entire Syndicate crew was unconscious or restrained. Commander Vexachar lay stunned on the deck, his cybernetic implants smoking from electromagnetic overload. "The recording," he gasped. "It will still be transmitted." "No, it won't," Marcus replied, helping Zarathiel secure the ship's communication systems. "Because we traced the transmission route and had Palace intelligence intercepted hours ago. Your blackmail material was destroyed before we left Lumina Prime." As they worked together to prepare the captured vessel for towing, Zarathiel marveled at how naturally they functioned as a team. Marcus's tactical brilliance complemented her raw power, while her abilities covered for his technological limitations. They were stronger together than either could be alone. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked as they headed back toward Asterian space with their prisoners. "Now we face the harder challenge," Zarathiel replied. "My father. The court. Everyone who will want to know why a princess is falling in love with her human guard." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "And what will you tell them?" Zarathiel's patterns shifted to brilliant silver, the color of starlight and certainty. "That love doesn't ask permission. It doesn't follow diplomatic protocols or respect social hierarchies, and sometimes the most important connections are the ones that seem impossible." She looked at him directly, her luminous eyes reflecting starlight and determination. "That a princess and a guard can become something greater than either could be alone, regardless of what destiny originally intended for them." As their ship entered Asterian space, both knew that their greatest battle was yet to come. The Void Syndicate had been an external threat, that could be fought with weapons and tactics. The forces that would oppose their relationship from within the Empire would require a different kind of courage entirely. A starborn princess, a human guard, and a love that defied destiny. The wedding ceremony combined 3,000 years of Asterian tradition with several innovations that scandalized the court and delighted the common people. Zarathiel wore the crown of eternal stars, its crystalline structure focusing her natural luminescence into patterns of breathtaking beauty. Marcus wore formal military dress with one addition that raised eyebrows throughout the nobility. Terran insignia, alongside Asterian honors, marking him as representing humanity. In this union between worlds, Emperor Kethmorian presided over the ceremony with stellar patterns that showed both pride and subtle amusement at the shocked reactions from traditionalist nobles. When the binding ritual required both parties to demonstrate their commitment through action rather than words, Zarathiel surprised everyone by temporarily dimming her luminescence, while Marcus spoke his vows. The gesture of vulnerability from someone whose power literally illuminated space created a moment of profound silence in the vast ceremonial chamber. "I promise to stand beside you not as your shadow, but as your equal partner," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the crystal acoustics. "To challenge you when you need challenge, support you when you need strength, and trust your judgment even when I don't understand your methods. Your light doesn't diminish mine, and mine doesn't compete with yours. Together we're stronger than either could be alone." When Zarathiel restored her full luminescence, the patterns showed deep silver mixed with gold, the traditional colors of eternal bonding mixed with the newer hue that represented change and growth. Her own vows carried the formal authority of royal decree, combined with personal conviction that resonated throughout the chamber. "I choose you not because tradition demands it, not because politics requires it, but because you see me as I am rather than what others expect me to be. You make me braver, wiser, and more determined to use whatever power I possess in service of others. Whatever challenges we face, we'll face them as partners who chose each other freely and completely." The celebration that followed lasted 3 days and established several precedents that would influence Asterian culture for generations. Human music was performed alongside traditional stellar harmonics. Terran diplomatic representatives were seated at tables of honor, usually reserved for ancient noble houses. Most significantly, Emperor Kethmorian publicly announced that Princess Zarathiel and her new consort would be assigned joint command of the border defense fleet currently assembled to counter Void Syndicate aggression. "Joint command?" Lord Vexton sputtered during the announcement feast. "Your Majesty, surely the princess's new husband requires more training before—" "The princess's husband," the Emperor interrupted with dangerous calm, "has more tactical experience than most of our career military officers, and the princess has more strategic vision than most of our career politicians. Together, they represent exactly the kind of adaptive leadership our current situation requires." The assignment was both honor and test, everyone understood. Success would validate the Emperor's controversial decision and establish Zarathiel and Marcus as legitimate leaders, worthy of eventual succession. Failure would provide ammunition for those who believed the royal marriage was a dangerous mistake that weakened the Empire. Marcus accepted the challenge with characteristic directness. "Your Majesty will either prove ourselves worthy of your trust or die trying. Either way, the Empire will have its answer about our capabilities." 3 weeks later, they stood on the bridge of the flagship Stellar Crown, watching tactical displays that showed the largest Void Syndicate fleet ever assembled massing just beyond the border systems. Intelligence estimates suggested over 300 vessels, including several of the massive dreadnoughts that could level planetary surfaces. "They're not just raiding this time," Admiral Corthalin observed, his scaled hide showing the stress patterns that indicated deep concern. "This is a full invasion force." Marcus studied the formation displays with the analytical focus that had kept him alive through a dozen impossible situations. "They're confident. Look at the positioning. They're not worried about ambush or tactical surprise. They think they know exactly what our response will be." Classical Asterian defense doctrine, Zarathiel agreed, her patterns shifting to tactical blue as she analyzed the strategic situation. "Establish defensive perimeters around key systems. Force them to attack fortified positions. Use our superior technology to grind them down through attrition." "Which won't work this time," Marcus concluded. They outnumber us 4-1, and they're obviously prepared for standard tactics. We need something they won't see coming. Admiral Corthalan's stress patterns deepened. Your Highness, the battle plans were approved by the High Command. Changing them now would require command authority, which the Emperor specifically granted us. Zarathiel interrupted gently. Admiral, we're not questioning your competence or experience. We're asking you to trust that sometimes the best defense is an unexpected offense. The plan they developed over the next 18 hours violated several fundamental principles of space warfare while incorporating tactical innovations that no traditional military academy would have taught. Instead of defending fixed positions, they would use Zarathiel's abilities to create a mobile beacon that could blind enemy sensors while providing guidance for precisely coordinated strikes by small, fast units. The princess will make herself a target, Admiral Corthalan protested. If the Syndicate concentrates fire on her ship, then they'll be focusing on the wrong target while our attack wings hit their flanks, Marcus replied. The key is timing and coordination. We need them thinking about her long enough for our real attack to develop. The battle began exactly as enemy intelligence had predicted. Asterian forces took defensive positions around the border system of Keth-Maran, establishing the kind of layered perimeter that had protected the Empire for centuries. Void Syndicate forces approached with the confidence of predators who had studied their prey's behavior. What they hadn't studied was how that behavior could change when a starborn princess and a human tactical genius decided to rewrite the rules. All units. This is Crown Command, Zarathiel announced on fleet frequencies as the enemy fleet approached weapons range. Execute Starfall Protocol on my signal. Her ship, the personal yacht Star's Dream, suddenly accelerated directly toward the enemy formation. Her stellar abilities flared to maximum intensity, creating a brilliant beacon that overwhelmed sensors for thousands of kilometers around. To the Syndicate fleet, it appeared that the Asterian princess was making a desperate solo charge, either through panic or misguided heroism. Target the glowing ship. Syndicate Admiral Vexmore commanded. All batteries concentrate fire. Take down their royal symbol. Hundreds of energy weapons focused on Star's Dream as it blazed through space like a living star. But the ship's enhanced shielding, combined with Zarathiel's ability to channel energy rather than simply absorbing it, turned the incoming fire into fuel for even brighter luminescence. While the entire enemy fleet fixated on the impossible sight of a princess apparently sacrificing herself in glorious futility, Marcus's real attack developed in their blind spots. Dozens of small, fast ships emerged from the stellar radiation shadow of Keth-Maran's star, using the system's natural background energy to mask their approach. Each vessel carried specialized warheads designed to target the weak points that human engineering had identified in Syndicate ship designs. Now, Marcus commanded from the tactical center aboard Stellar Crown. The coordinated strike hit 17 key vessels simultaneously, crippling the enemy fleet's command structure and primary weapon systems. Admiral Vexmore's flagship found itself dead in space with its communications down and its main guns offline. Impossible, the Syndicate Admiral gasped as his officers reported system failures throughout the fleet. How did they? His answer came in the form of Zarathiel's voice on emergency frequencies, speaking with the authority of someone who had just demonstrated that royal blood came with tactical brilliance. Admiral Vexmore, this is Princess Zarathiel of the Asterian Empire. Your fleet is crippled, your command structure is compromised, and you have 60 seconds to order a full withdrawal before we target your life support systems. The choice is surrender or die here in the void. The Syndicate withdrawal was swift and complete, leaving behind disabled vessels and the shocked realization that Asterian military doctrine had just evolved in ways that would require entirely new strategic thinking. As the fleet regrouped and began processing prisoners from the abandoned ships, Admiral Corthalan approached Marcus and Zarathiel with something approaching awe in his stress patterns. Your Highnesses, in 40 years of military service, I have never seen anything like that coordination. How did you predict their tactical responses so precisely? Marcus and Zarathiel exchanged glances, their partnership operating on levels that transcended words. We didn't predict their responses, Zarathiel replied. We created them. Sometimes the best strategy is giving your enemy exactly what they expect to see while preparing something they could never imagine. And sometimes, Marcus added. The most effective weapon is the enemy's. A starborn princess, a human guard, and a love that defied destiny. The throne room of Lumina Prime had never felt so vast or so cold. Emperor Kethamorian sat upon the crystal throne, his stellar patterns displaying the controlled fury that preceded imperial judgment. Around the perimeter, nobles, advisors, and court officials watched with the hungry anticipation of predators sensing weakness. Word had spread quickly about Princess Zarathiel's successful mission against the Void Syndicate, but also about the relationship that had been discovered in the process. Marcus stood at attention beside Zarathiel, his dress uniform marking him as palace security rather than nobility. The distance between their positions measured more than physical space. It represented centuries of protocol, tradition, and bloodline purity that governed Asterian succession. Approach, the Emperor commanded. They walked forward together, their footsteps echoing in the crystalline chamber. Zarathiel's patterns remained steady, warm gold mixed with silver, showing both respect for her father and unwavering determination. She had made her choice, and nothing in this room would change it. Explain, Emperor Kethamorian said simply. The single word carried the weight of imperial authority, but Zarathiel had inherited that same strength. She stepped forward slightly, positioning herself as the primary speaker. Father, I have found someone who sees me as a person rather than a political symbol. Someone who protects me because of who I am, not what I represent. Someone who makes me stronger rather than weaker. Murmurs rippled through the assembled court. Lord Vexthon, the chief advisor, stepped forward with barely concealed disapproval. Your Majesty, this liaison threatens the purity of the royal bloodline. The starborn essence cannot be diluted with primitive genetics. The princess's children would be what? Zarathiel interrupted, her patterns flaring with dangerous intensity. Less than pure, unworthy of consideration? You speak as though genetic heritage determines personal value. It determines royal succession, Lord Vexthon replied coldly. The throne requires rulers who carry the full stellar essence. Half-breeds cannot. Marcus moved before anyone could react. His hand didn't go to his weapon, but his posture shifted into something that made every guard in the room tense. The threat wasn't violence. It was the promise of consequences for anyone who continued that line of discussion. Choose your next words very carefully, Marcus said quietly, because I've spent my career protecting people from those who judge worth by bloodline, and I'm very good at my job. The Emperor raised a hand, forestalling any response. His stellar patterns shifted to deep blue, the color of profound thought and careful consideration. Lord Vexthon raises legitimate concerns about succession, he said slowly. But his manner of expressing them suggests he has forgotten that the throne serves the people, not the other way around. Relief flickered through Zarathiel's patterns, but her father wasn't finished. However, daughter, you cannot simply dismiss the reality of our situation. The royal bloodline carries responsibilities that extend beyond personal happiness. Your children will face expectations and challenges that no half-human could fully comprehend. Then perhaps, Zarathiel replied with careful composure, it's time to change those expectations. The silence that followed could have frozen stellar plasma, suggesting changes to royal tradition bordered on revolutionary thinking, and everyone present understood the implications. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying the respectful tone of someone addressing his sovereign while speaking absolute truth. Your Majesty, I've served alongside beings from dozens of species. I've seen the strength that comes from diversity, from combining different approaches to solve common problems. The princess and I make each other better not despite our differences but because of them. You speak of military tactics, Lord Vexthon interjected. Royal succession requires different considerations. Does it? Marcus met the advisor's gaze directly. Because from what I've observed, effective leadership requires the same qualities regardless of context. Vision, courage, the ability to inspire others, and the wisdom to put duty before personal comfort. The princess has all of those traits, And they don't come from her stellar heritage, they come from who she chooses to be. Emperor Kethmorian studied Marcus with new interest. You believe bloodline is irrelevant to leadership? I believe bloodline is irrelevant to character, Your Majesty. And character determines whether someone deserves to lead, regardless of their genetic advantages. The Emperor's patterns shifted again, cycling through colors that indicated deep internal debate. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decision. There is precedent, he said slowly, for royal marriages that serve the greater good of the empire rather than tradition. The Second Dynasty was founded when Princess Learthala married a Corvan warrior to secure crucial military alliances. That was different, Lord Vexthon protested. The Corvans possess natural abilities that complemented Asterian power. Humans have no such capabilities, don't they? The Emperor's gaze focused on Marcus with calculating intensity. Captain Veltar's reports indicate that this human has accomplished what our enhanced guards could not. He has anticipated threats that our most sophisticated security systems missed. He has adapted to situations that would have overwhelmed beings with superior physical abilities. Marcus felt the weight of imperial attention and chose his words carefully. Your Majesty, humans survive through cooperation, adaptation, and the refusal to accept defeat. We don't have natural advantages, so we learn to create our own advantages. Sometimes that's exactly what a situation requires. Indeed. The Emperor rose from his throne, his massive presence filling the chamber. Which brings us to the heart of the matter. Zarathiel, do you believe this human makes you a better leader? Yes, Father. He challenges me to think tactically rather than just diplomatically. He shows me strength that doesn't come from power, but from conviction. He helps me understand that being royal means serving others, not being served by them. And you, Marcus Chen of Terra, do you believe you can accept the burden of royal responsibility? The scrutiny, the expectations, the reality that your choices will affect billions of lives? Marcus straightened to full attention. Your Majesty, I've spent my career putting others' welfare before my own comfort. If the princess will have me, I'll spend my life ensuring she can lead this empire to its full potential. The Emperor's patterns shifted to brilliant white, the color of royal decree and absolute authority. Then let it be recorded that Princess Zarathiel has our permission to marry Marcus Chen, with the full blessing of the Crystal Throne on 3 conditions. The court held its breath as he continued. First, any children of this union will be raised to understand both their stellar heritage and their human adaptability as equal strengths. Second, Marcus Chen will undergo formal training in royal protocol, imperial law, and diplomatic procedure to prepare him for his future role. Third, both will demonstrate their worthiness through service to the empire, not as symbols but as leaders who earn their authority through competent action. Zarathiel's patterns exploded into rainbow brilliance, joy radiating from her like starlight. Marcus felt something settle in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when accepting impossible missions that turned out to be merely difficult. Thank you, Your Majesty, they said in unison. As the court buzzed with shocked conversation and the implications of this unprecedented decision, Lord Vexthon made one final attempt to influence the situation. Your Majesty, surely a trial period would be more appropriate. A formal engagement that could be dissolved if circumstances. Lord Vexthon, the Emperor interrupted with dangerous calm. Are you suggesting that my judgment requires review? By the Advisory Council? The advisor immediately backpedaled. Of course not, Your Majesty. I merely thought. You thought incorrectly. The decision is made, the decree is issued, and anyone who wishes to challenge it may do so formally through appropriate channels. The Emperor's pattern shifted to warning amber. I trust that won't be necessary. As the court session concluded and officials dispersed to spread word of the historic announcement, Zarathiel and Marcus found themselves alone in the antechamber adjacent to the throne room. So, Marcus said, with characteristic understatement, that went better than expected. Zarathiel laughed, the sound like crystal bells in starlight. You realize what you've just committed to? Royal protocol training with Lord Vexthon, diplomatic dinners with beings who think you're a barbarian, State ceremonies that last for hours. And you realize what you've committed to? Marcus replied. A relationship with someone who will never bow and scrape, who will argue with your decisions when I think you're wrong, and who comes from a species with a terrible reputation for disrupting ancient traditions. Perfect, Zarathiel said, her patterns shifting to warm silver as she took his hand. I was getting tired of predictability. Their first challenge as an engaged couple would come sooner than either expected. Intelligence reports were already filtering in about Void Syndicate fleets massing near the border systems, and Emperor Kethmorian had plans that would test their partnership in ways that peaceful palace life never could. But for this moment, standing together in the crystalline halls of power, they had HE, a starborn princess, a human guard, and a love that defied destiny 5 years after the Battle of Kethmorian. The crystal spires of Lumina Prime gleamed with new additions, architectural elements that blended Asterian artistry with human engineering principles. The changes reflected deeper transformations throughout the Empire, as the unprecedented success of Princess Zarathiel and Prince Consort Marcus had inspired innovations in military doctrine, diplomatic protocol, and social policy. Their private quarters in the royal complex had also evolved, becoming a unique fusion of stellar beauty and practical functionality. Marcus had insisted on reinforced windows after the third assassination attempt, while Zarathiel had added crystalline formations that could focus her natural luminescence into defensive barriers if needed. The room reflected their partnership, beautiful but functional, traditional yet adaptable. The delegation from the Corvin Republic arrives tomorrow, Marcus reported during their morning briefing, which had become a cherished routine that combined official business with intimate conversation. Intelligence suggests they're interested in adopting our integrated command structure for their own border defenses. 3 species have requested military advisors this month, Zarathiel observed, her patterns shifting to pleased gold. Apparently our impossible tactical innovations have become the new standard for asymmetric warfare. Marcus smiled, remembering how many experts had predicted disaster when they first proposed using Asterian abilities as active tactical elements rather than passive power sources. Now their methods were being studied in military academies across the galaxy. Speaking of innovations, he said carefully, Dr. Vailthan wants to discuss her latest research findings. Zarathiel's patterns immediately shifted to curious silver. Dr. Vailthan was the Empire's leading geneticist, and her research had been focused on understanding the implications of human Asterian genetic compatibility ever since. The royal marriage had raised questions about potential offspring, good news or concerning news, both according to her preliminary notes. They met Dr. Vailthan in her laboratory complex, where holographic displays showed complex genetic models that Marcus found fascinating, and Zarathiel understood with the intuitive grasp that came from carrying stellar essence in her DNA. Your Highnesses, the doctor began, her scientific excitement overriding court protocol. The genetic compatibility between your species is far more remarkable than we initially realized. She gestured to a display showing intertwined DNA helixes that pulsed with patterns of light. Human genetic adaptability doesn't just complement Asterian stellar essence. It enhances it in ways we're only beginning to understand. Meaning? Marcus asked, though Zarathiel's patterns were already shifting to amazed comprehension. Meaning your children won't be diminished versions of either species. They'll represent something entirely new, beings who combine stellar manipulation abilities with human adaptability and innovation. The genetic models suggest capabilities that neither parent species possesses individually. Zarathiel moved closer to the displays, studying projections that showed potential abilities, stellar essence that could be consciously modified and directed, enhanced pattern recognition that combined human analytical thinking with Asterian intuitive understanding, and what Dr. Vailthan termed adaptive luminescence, the ability to modify stellar patterns for specific purposes rather than just emotional expression. There's more, the doctor continued. Human DNA appears to carry what we're calling compatibility markers, genetic sequences that allow for beneficial fusion with multiple species' genetic patterns. Your children could represent the first generation of truly pan-galactic beings. Marcus felt something profound settle in his understanding. You're saying humans aren't just compatible with Asterians, We're compatible with everyone. Not everyone, but far more species than current science thought possible. It's as if your species evolved to be genetic bridges between different evolutionary paths. The implications rippled through both their minds. Humanity's apparent primitiveness might actually represent a unique evolutionary advantage, the ability to connect, adapt, and synthesize with other species in ways that created entirely new possibilities. The question, Dr. Vailthan concluded, is whether you're ready for the responsibility that comes with this knowledge. 3 months later, that question became more than theoretical when Zarathiel confirmed what her shifting patterns had been suggesting for weeks. She was pregnant, and the child she carried would be the first human-Asterian hybrid in recorded history. The announcement created reactions that ranged from celebration to concern throughout the Empire. Progressive factions saw it as the beginning of a new era of interspecies cooperation. Conservative groups worried about unknown consequences of genetic experimentation. The scientific community approached it with fascination and careful monitoring. Marcus approached it with the same methodical preparation that characterized all his endeavors. He read every available text on Asterian reproduction, consulted with xenobiologists from a dozen species, and established security protocols that would protect both mother and child throughout the pregnancy. You're treating this like a military operation, Zarathiel observed with amusement as he reviewed medical facility floor plans for the 15th time. Because it is a military operation, Marcus replied seriously. We're establishing a beachhead for the future of interspecies cooperation. Failure isn't an option. And if the child has abilities we don't understand, then we'll learn to understand them. Together. The pregnancy progressed with constant monitoring from Dr. Vailthan's team and protection from an enhanced security detail that Marcus personally trained. Zarathiel's stellar patterns showed new formations that seemed to respond to the developing life within her swirling, colors that pulsed with rhythms that matched fetal, heartbeats and neural development. The child is already displaying genetic expression patterns, Dr. Vailthan reported during a routine examination. The stellar essence is integrating with human neural development in ways that suggest enhanced cognitive abilities alongside energy manipulation capabilities. Enhanced how? Marcus asked. Processing speed, pattern recognition, and what appears to be an intuitive understanding of multiple species' psychological patterns. This child may be naturally empathic toward any species they encounter. 6 months into the pregnancy, the first major test of their genetic innovation came when Void Syndicate remnants launched a desperate attack on the research facility where Dr. Vailthan's work was being conducted. The assault was clearly aimed at capturing or destroying evidence of human-Asterian compatibility, but it revealed something unexpected. Zarathiel's protective instincts, combined with the developing child's stellar essence, created a defensive capability that surprised everyone, including herself. When attackers breached the facility's outer perimeters, her luminescence flared not with blinding light but with precisely controlled energy patterns that disrupted electronic systems, overwhelmed organic nervous systems, and created protective barriers that moved and adapted to counter incoming threats. Marcus coordinated the defensive response with tactical precision, but he found himself working alongside abilities that exceeded anything Zarathiel had displayed before. The child within her was somehow amplifying and focusing her natural powers in ways that turned her into a strategic weapon system. The pregnancy isn't just creating a new being, Dr. Vailthan observed after analyzing recordings of the incident. It's evolving the mother's capabilities as well. The child's developing neural patterns are networking with Zarathiel's stellar essence, creating symbiotic enhancement. When their daughter was finally born, she emerged into the world with eyes that held starlight and skin that carried the faintest luminescent patterns. But more remarkable than her appearance was her immediate response to the beings around her. She looked at each person with focused attention that suggested recognition rather than the random movements typical of newborns. "Hello, little one," Marcus whispered as he held her for the first time. "Welcome to a galaxy that's about to become much more interesting." The child, whom they named Lunachen, combining Asterian and Terran naming traditions, represented more than a royal heir. She was proof that love could literally create new possibilities, that connections between different beings could produce something greater than the sum of their parts. as Emperor Kethamorian held his granddaughter. His stellar pattern showed emotions that had no names in any species' language: pride, wonder, hope, and the profound satisfaction of someone who had gambled on love and watched it transform the universe. She will never be bound by the limitations that constrained previous generations, he observed, watching Lunachan's tiny patterns respond to his voice. The question is what she'll choose to do with possibilities no one has ever possessed. The same thing her parents did, Zarathiel replied, her own patterns radiating contentment and determination. Use whatever abilities she has in service of others. Create connections where others see only differences. Prove that love doesn't just conquer, it creates. Years later, historians would mark Lunachan's birth as the beginning of the integration era, when barriers between species began dissolving in favor of cooperative evolution.